Hey everybody, welcome to Convertible Conversations. This week I'm going to do a little series on the parable of the prodigal son. That's really a misnomer, but that's what a lot of people call it. It comes from Luke chapter 15. This is the only time in the recorded history of Jesus where he tells three parables or illustrative stories back to back to back about the same subject. So we can certainly infer from that this may be the most important subject of all to Jesus that he wants people to know, and I believe it is. In Luke chapter 15, he tells three parables. The first one's the parable of the lost sheep. A man has 100 sheep. One of them gets lost, so he goes to look for that one. Second one is a widow woman who doesn't have much money or resources. She has 10 coins, which represent her net worth. She loses one of them, and she searches till she finds it. And then the third one, arguably the most important one of all, is the prodigal son. So I'm going to take 5 days this week to talk about it. Each one of these messages will be a standalone message. There'll be good things I hope to get from it, but when taken as a whole, it'll be best. So today I'm just going to talk about the cast, the players, the people in this. There's some different groups. The first group are what's called sinners and tax collectors. Now, sinners and tax collectors, that was sort of code for the worst of the worst of the worst of society. These were the people who did all the wrong things, all the bad things, and not just once, but they continue to do them. So they're on one side. On the other side are the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. The Pharisees were the super religious people who believed that you had to keep the rules exactly all of the time in order to gain and maintain favor with God. And they prided themselves that they kept them all. And they even went way above and beyond what the law said. They were stern-faced, unhappy people who were always watching people, always judging people, always keeping a list of other people's wrongdoings and telling other people how bad they are. They were the religious, hyper-religious people of the day. And they were the leaders of the country, too. All right. Along with these sinners, there was this one boy who's called the prodigal boy. And there's his brother, the older brother, who's simply called the older brother. And then there is the father. So we got the sinners and the prodigal son, the wayward son on one side. We've got the Pharisees, the religious, legalistic people, and the older brother on the other side. And then right in the middle we have the father. And of course, Jesus telling the story. So Jesus tells the story about the father, his two boys, and it says in the very beginning of Luke chapter 15 that Jesus is there meeting with and talking to the sinners and the tax collectors, the dregs of society, the worst of the worst. That's who he hung out with. And it says the Pharisees, the religious leaders and the teachers of the law, they came to see what was going on. And they criticized Jesus for hanging out with the sinners and the tax collectors. They thought, and they said to him, if you are a man of God, surely you would know who these people are, and you wouldn't even be hanging out with them. You would be hanging out with us, because we're the good people. We're us, they're them. We've done the right things to get God to bless us, and we're the ones that if you were from God, you should come to see. Okay, so there's the cast. Now, Jesus tells this story, which we'll get into starting tomorrow, but I want you to think, I'd appreciate it if you'd read this in advance. Read Luke chapter 15, the first 3 verses, and then especially the third story in that chapter, the story which we call the parable of the prodigal son. Read that in more than one versions, if you'd like, and have an open mind, because I think you're going to see some things as we go through this that you may never have seen before. I certainly have in the last few years. I've saw some things that I didn't see what I was taught in your grandmother's church growing up, or even in the church that I taught in for a while. So read that if you would, and think about what it feels like to be a sinner and know that you've done wrong. And then think about, if you can, hopefully you're not like this, but think about being a religious zealot like the church lady, a hyper-religious fundamentalist legalist who's always watching everybody, looking down their nose at them, and keeping a list of all the things that they're doing wrong, and knowing, of course, that God doesn't like that, God's not for them, God is going to get them. So have that in mind then as we read this. I'll come back tomorrow and I'll talk about Act 1. All right. Hey, thanks. See you tomorrow.